Welcome to a new Zeta report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We're live first Mondays of every month. And joining us today, as she does on all of the Zeta Report episodes, is Nancy Leader of Zeta Talk and PulseShift.ning.com. Nancy, great to have you back with us.
Oh, we have a packed hour. It's going to be interesting. It's what did the eclipse tell us about the presence of Nibiru? How did Nibiru show up? And what have Hurricane Harvey and Irma told us about the Wobble, proven about the Wobble? So it's a dual agenda. Before we get into it, let me just mention our standard disclaimer. In partnership with USAEBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes, and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit zetatalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. Questions from the chat and issues raised in the chat will be addressed toward the end of the hour after the main feature has been presented. So this is talking about the eclipse, which I watched closely, of course, because the Zetas refused to give a clue as to what would be revealed or not revealed. During the eclipse, we had a path across the United States that was known, etc. Well, what emerged? In general, the path was too high, slightly too high. Totality was on the top side of the path, but not the bottom side of the path. And also, there were many times when Nibiru made an appearance in its moon swirls, and I will be specific. Did evidence of Nibiru and its vast debris and moon-ridden tail show up? It did indeed. The moon reduced the glare from the sun, allowing greater visibility, plus the sunglasses the public was encouraged to use acted as a glare-reducing filter. Millions of people were looking at the sun with the glare partially reduced by the moon and partially reduced by these sunglasses, and that's the ideal setting for seeing Nibiru and its complex. A photo from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, using only a nearby cloud as a glare reducer, showed Nibiru as a distinct orb at the 5 o'clock position to the sun. Another photo from a private individual elsewhere showed the same thing, Nibiru at 5 o'clock. Now, my YouTube will have these photos as to match what I'm saying here. But the point is, as I go along, these are private photos, and they were sent to me on email or collected off Facebook postings or whatever, and they would confirm each other. This is the best kind of confirmation where more than one person gets the same thing. Then National Geo took a photo. It was wonderful. When the glare of the sun was removed by the eclipse, the moon swirls of Nibiru showed up below and to the left and then above the sun. This is normal. In the photos that we get on the PulseShiftNing.com, it is normally showing the moon swirl slinging down below the sun, then slinging to the left, and then arriving to the top of the sun because it goes in a retrograde swirl, just as Nibiru has a retrograde orbit and a retrograde orbit and rotation. So National Geo sent a plane way up above the atmosphere. You could see the atmosphere down below. No clouds. And they took a picture of the eclipse, a totality eclipse. And there was, below the sun, to the left and above, this swirly stuff. That's the trash in the tail of Nibiru. And, of course, that's where everybody else finds the moon swirls, too. And who can doubt that National Geographic is real and valid and credible, right? This matched by a private photo from Tampa, Florida. In this Tampa photo, the moon is covering that portion of the sun, yet there is more brightness there. And talking about the moon swirls, when you look at when you cover the sun, you can see this brightness in that quarter, from the bottom from the 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock position. And this even showed up in official NASA type photos, where you could see, well, that didn't match the sun. That's not where any sunspots were, and the sun was pretty darn sleepy. Though NASA used filters strong enough to block out the stars, it was a black sky, and you'd see this white crescent, and that was it. They blocked out everything. But this narrow, you couldn't see the sun's corona, nothing, right? And so therefore they say, well, there it is, that's the eclipse. And TV stations were told, flip up a photo from NASA, rather if you have any questions about your photos or that type of thing. So, and they did that. Wait until you hear. A red light peaked around the edge of the moon at the 3 o'clock position where no sunspot or CME existed on the placid sun, per a photo from WLOS in North Carolina. Now, that's where Nibiru would appear, is around the 3, 4, 5 o'clock position, depending on the slant of the ecliptic, etc., or the exact time of day. Likewise, on the left side of the sun, where the moon swirls of Nibiru waft, if this light is not coming from the sun, then it is coming from Nibiru and the moon swirls. In Idaho, Steve Olson streamed live from his home. Though NASA used filters strong enough to block out the stars, it was a black sky, and you'd see this white crescent, and that was it. They blocked out everything. But this narrow, you couldn't see the sun's corona, nothing, right? And so therefore they say, well, there it is, that's the eclipse. And TV stations were told, flip up a photo from NASA, rather if you have any questions about your photos or that type of thing. So, and they did that. Wait until you hear. A red light peaked around the edge of the moon at the 3 o'clock position where no sunspot or CME existed on the placid sun, per a photo from WLOS in North Carolina. Now, that's where Nibiru would appear, is around the 3, 4, 5 o'clock position, depending on the slant of the ecliptic, etc., or the exact time of day. Likewise, on the left side of the sun, where the moon swirls of Nibiru waft, if this light is not coming from the sun, then it is coming from Nibiru and the moon swirls. In Idaho, Steve Olson streamed live from his home, which is located on an eastern Oregon, western Idaho area. He doesn't give his exact address, but he gave that general description. When seen through his sunglasses to reduce the glare, the total eclipse looks as expected, a black dot in the center of the sun. But without the sunglasses, because he put his sunglasses up in front of the camera, but without the sunglasses, a distinct blush appears where the moon reduced the glare of the sun. First on the left-hand side where the moon swirls ride, then on the 5 o'clock position to the sun where Nibiru is located. And why would you get that blush? Ghosts. Now, I don't know if anybody who's tried to take pictures of the sun realizes that when you do, you get a ghost in the camera, and it's really a copy of the sun because it's so darn bright, and it's like a reflection, and it'll pop up here and there, and you sometimes even in front of a tree, or but it's called a ghost reflection of the sun. So most, if not all private photos show a ghost image, which is normal for shots of the sun. Normally the glare of the sun hides these ghost images, which are internal to the camera. The ghost image was dramatically shown by photos from Malahide, Ontario, as most of them have a double ghost. This was I mean, there it is. It's not the eclipse because it doubled up, boop, boop, like twins. The filter used was a welder's lens, which often filters out evidence of Nibiru as well as the glare of the sun. If you used too heavy a welder's lens, you don't see Nibiru or the moon swirls. It has to be a lighter welder's lens. But evidence of Nibiru at the 5 o'clock position to the sun showed up, as is the drifting tail wafting to the left of Nibiru. As noted in the Ontario photo, totality north of the predicted path was greater than expected. I had this repeatedly showing up as people sent me emails and all that kind of thing. This is what I got from my cell phone or my whatever. A series of unfiltered photos from Denver, Colorado show what a close examination can reveal. At first glance, nothing seems to be there, but when checked after a color invert or if hue enhanced, there lies Nibiru and a distinct moon swirl. Nibiru shows a shadow away from the sun side, showing it lies between the Earth and Sun and somewhat to the right. The moon swirl shows up distinctly as a color inversion, showing that the entire swirl is emitting light, not sunlight reflected off local clouds. So you must see the YouTube video to see all my photos. I've got a bunch of them. And everything I'm describing here I will show you. It'll be up by tomorrow afternoon. Due to the Earth wobble, which shoves the globe into a figure 8 daily, back and forth and then to the right and to the left, like that, the path of the eclipse was not likely to be as predicted. Tacoma, Washington is near the Seattle area, and it was not in the path of 100% totality. Yet in private photos from Tacoma, the totality seems almost complete, and the moon is eclipsing the sun in a straight left-to-right manner, whereas the Madras, Oregon area, which was supposed to be in the path, the moon is eclipsing the sun atop the sun, not straight across, and this is one example of the path being to the north of where expected. The path was wrong. Totality to the north of the path greater than expected. This could be seen in these private photos from Tacoma, Washington, and Ontario, and from Grand Blanc, Michigan. In a photo capture from Tampa, Florida at 2:03 p.m., when totality should have been at its zenith, the eclipse can clearly be seen in a camera ghost of the sun, but totality is less than expected. So, I had it nailed on that, that the path was not right. When compared to sky map expectations, those with astronomy timings that are supposed to be accurate centuries into the past, as well as forward, not only was the path wrong, but the timing was wrong too. Totality was later than expected. Now, this eclipse, flew across the United States in like a 2.5-minute period. This is not the Earth's turn or the Moon's orbit. This was Zeta's explained it as, that the Moon's orbit is not with the ecliptic; it's at a tilt, and the Moon and the Earth also, as it turns, east to west, is not straight across to the sun, so that explains, the brief opportunity. So these people that were watching this were, blink and you miss it, right? And anyone who would say, well, I didn't get up, but, the problem is that, you blinked at the wrong time, or your watch was off, or, the cover-up over Nibiru is well acquainted with ridiculing people, and they do. They make you feel like a worm. You don't know what you're talking about. The solar eclipse of August 21st did a rapid race across the continent with exacting times and locations for the path of totality known. Because of the Earth wobble, the globe is in the process of dropping the North Pole when the sun is over the American continent. Thus, the path was wrong, giving better totality to those above the predicted path and less for those below. In other words, the wobble is constantly ongoing. Something or other, it's either top or down or right or left, and it was moving. Well, they didn't, I don't know whether they adjusted the path for the Earth wobble as predicted by the Zetas and as actually happening in the days preceding, but probably not. Maybe they did, but probably not, and therefore the path was wrong. And it got worse as it got toward the East Coast. If the degree of totality was wrong and the timing was off, the angle was also wrong. Davison, North Carolina is close to the path of predicted totality, but a private report from Davison, North Carolina shows the eclipse as reflected on a garage. You know, this ghost of the sun would often give you the clearest picture, and it would show up somewhere, and she caught it on a garage, and said, "There it is on the garage," you know, and everybody, almost every photo had this ghost of the eclipse, and this is not like some phantom. This is real. That's the sun and the moon, and it's the eclipse and the degree of totality. The angle was wrong in Davison, North Carolina. The sun should be showing above the moon, but the sun instead was below the moon. And that's how far off it was. Bracing for such eclipse revelations, the establishment, still maintaining the cover-up over the presence and pending passage of Nibiru, took steps. They began spreading chemtrails. The public was encouraged to stay home and watch the NASA feed on TV. Bad weather was predicted and terrible traffic problems. Chemtrails were being heavily sprayed, as was noted on online forums. Posters noted that the NASA live feed dropped or cut out at crucial moments when Nibiru or the moon swirls might be seen. Quoting some common comments from these observations. Woke up to a mess of chemtrails here in Kentucky. Northeast Washington looks like it will be clear with a bit of chemtrails. Haze left over from yesterday when they were out in full force. Doesn't it seem like the chemtrails are a bit worse today in New Jersey? Every news feed in the UK cut away from the finale, either with a slither of sunlight straight to NASA's live feed of totality. In other words, they didn't show the local feed picture. They went to the NASA stuff, which was canned. Every camera cut out on the moment of totality. Even this slow feed glitched for the full 2 minutes. The only one, a live one, was a NASA feed. Very controlled. And it's probably pre-recorded in their CGI chamber. Even the live feed just now on Sky did the same. In Salt Lake City, I only saw about 60% eclipse rather than the 93% advertised prior. So, a lot of chemtrails, a lot of cutting out at the moment of totality, a lot of games, and it didn't pass unnoticed to the public. The media was squirming, aware that the path and degree of totality was skewing. As the eclipse moved across the continent, conservative North Carolina took steps to avoid showing this. Franklin, North Carolina, is on the border of North Carolina and Georgia, where totality was expected. WLOS, which is an ABC News 13 out of Asheville, chose to show NASA photos rather than local photos, though it appears such local photos would have been available. We were shown local folk just before the totality, and blue sky overhead was apparent, but the station chose to show a NASA photo. I was watching this and taking screen prints like crazy, right? There was a guy standing, well, we're waiting, it'll be any minute now, and there was no rain, and people were standing around on this deck, and then, we have talking heads in the station, here it comes, and then they show the people because in totality, it looks like it's dusk or almost getting dark. It's like the sun has gone down and that's it, a lot of sunlight. So they were showing people milling around a tent area in a semi-dark, but they didn't look at the sky. And this, overhead you could see blue sky. So they didn't have clouds and they didn't have rain. And all of a sudden, they switched to a woman in a car, pouring rain. It was a different person entirely, a different location. Oh, dear, such rain. What you were supposed to remember is they told you totality happened. Here's the NASA photo. And, look at this poor woman caught in the rain. And I took a look at the weather map, and it wasn't anywhere near there, where they were beaming out from. So it was a setup. And they were told, if you can't get a good totality that matches what you're supposed to get, just show the NASA picture and wing it, and they dutifully went along. ABC News. How much of the Nibiru complex did the mainstream media show? They predictably played it safe. CNN showed NASA images or carefully screened and approved images. They emphasized how quickly it was all over, quoting a CNN source. Unless you are flying a fighter jet, you won't be able to follow the shadow, which will be traveling at almost 3,000 miles an hour when it enters the U.S. and then slows to nearly 1,500 miles per hour when it traverses South Carolina. Well, they were wrong on the timing, as I mentioned, because what people were showing, there it is, my totality, and they were off by 15, 20 minutes, etc. Well, this stuff was astronomy is supposed to be knock on, precise, and they don't just say, well, we do, wing it. That doesn't happen in astronomy. That's why they can say this is where the, in 3010, this is where the moon is going to be for you at 8:03 at night. They can say that with confidence because these things are that regular. Okay,
well, even
NBC,
I was going to say too that even the ancient peoples, the Mayans, the Aztecs, and they were astronomers, and they wrote a calendar based on eclipses and moon phases and sun movements and astronomy. I mean, and that's so.
Yeah.
One interesting thing though, Nancy, when I was after last month's episode when we were doing the pre-eclipse show and wondering what might happen, I did see a television clip from the last total eclipse in the United States, which I believe was 1986 or 1983, one of those two. But I was an ABC News broadcast talking about the next one that's coming up, and they said the day, August 21st, 2017, on this 1980s broadcast of television. So yeah, it's mapped out. I mean, that's Farmer's Almanacs, all based on, seasonalities, and so why would it change all of a sudden this time around?
Yeah, the path was wrong and the timing was wrong. Right. And watched by just millions, and so I get into that a little bit later about how many people understand that Nibiru, the subconscious knowledge that they know what the truth is and that they're being lied to. NBC Media had an interactive map of images sent in by the public, which was primarily of the crowds wearing glasses. Of course, these shared cell phone images were carefully selected to exclude any real evidence of Nibiru. Most media images provided were from NASA, quoting NBC News. Below is a map of real-time Instagram uploads by folks who had the best seats in the house. Click on the dots to see what people saw through their smartphone lenses. Well, you didn't see the sun. You saw people looking at people, I guess. Fox Media, surprisingly, did the best in allowing hints of Nibiru to show through, particularly by allowing brightness where the moon swirls ride to show through, and allowing more locally taken photos vis-a-vis NASA black sky photos. When NASA shows an eclipse with a totality black sky everywhere, but where a crescent of sun is showing, this is a cover-up. The sun's corona is not showing. Stars cannot be seen in the background. So that's my report on the eclipse, and I go much into this, in a newsletter, which you can find on my website or on the Pole Shifting. And Nibiru made an appearance, and they just made excuses and maneuvered to keep you dumb and stupid. And if you come forward and say, well, we sat there and we were all wearing sunglasses and had cell phones, and I'll tell you, what we saw was, oh no, what do you know? You're just dirt. We're the experts, Let's ask NASA. Okay, they said you're just dirt. You don't know nothing, and that's how they treat you. They ridicule you and to make you shut up. But if you're somebody of authority, then they just take you out and shoot you. And hundreds of people have died. Trying to bring this, to the people and let them know. It just gets worse.
Yeah.
The more truth that comes out, the tighter the cover-up becomes, and the more ridiculous the excuses become. So here is another aspect. On the eclipse, we saw it, right? But and we saw evidence of the wobble in the fact that the path was wrong and all that. But the two hurricanes, Harvey and Irma, have shown us the wobble, and this and undeniable. In Hurricane Harvey was aiming for Corpus Christi. It landed. It went inland, I don't know, to the middle of Texas practically. And whoop, it backed up and moved down the coast a little further to Houston, and it hit Houston. Then it backed up and moved a little further down. Now, they don't do this. They don't back up. They can make a turn, but if you follow the cones are smooth. They don't back up. And so it was dramatic. However, that's what the wobble did. It dropped up to 50 inches of rain, and as we know, on Houston, on the fourth largest city in the U.S. Questions arise as to why the mayor of Houston chose not to evacuate the city's 2.3 million inhabitants, although I think it was closer to 6, 7, 8 million or something. The answer lies in Harvey's path. It wasn't originally in the path. It was Corpus Christi, and then went directly inland. Quoting AP News, before the storm that arrived Friday as a Category 4 hurricane is gone, some parts of Houston and its suburbs could get as much as 50 inches of rain. This would be the highest amount ever recorded in Texas. Conflicting advice was given by the governor and Houston's leaders before the hurricane. Governor Greg Abbott urged people to flee from Harvey's path, but the Houston mayor issued no evacuation orders and told everyone to stay home, citing the risks of sending the city's 2.3 million inhabitants onto the highways at the same time. Well, like I said, you look at the cones and you see gradual curves. I mean, it can make a 90-degree turn, but it isn't abrupt. It's gradual. Hurricanes invariably travel in predictable cones known as the cone of uncertainty. In fact, a search of prior hurricanes striking the East Coast and Gulf states showed this evenly curving cone. Whether remaining offshore of the East Coast or heading inland as Sandy did in 2012, the curve is smooth. Hurricane Charlie in 2004 made landfall above Tampa in 2004, becoming a tropical storm thereafter in the usual manner, but retained its smooth cone throughout. Hurricane Ivan in 2004 and Rita in 2005 both came into the Gulf states for landfall, both with smooth, predictable cones. And I have examples, and do come see my YouTube. In fact, no hurricanes of record matched the erratic path of Harvey. Harvey's path up through the Caribbean curved like a snake, but most dramatic was that after making landfall at Corpus Christi and being well inland at that location, Harvey backed up and moved along the water to make a second landing or second landfall. I mean, this was not a curve. It went, it went into reverse and backed up. It was amazing. You can see it. They've charted this, you can see it. Anyway, I love visuals. The visuals prove it. The snaky path and reset were not all that was odd about Harvey. It was also moved faster than expected. Quoting the New York Times, Hurricane Harvey, powered by the Gulf of Mexico's warm waters, made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane at about 9:45 p.m. Friday, earlier than expected. In the opinion of the Zetas, this was due to the Earth wobble, and they get specific. Quoting Zeta Talk, and please remember, this is an opinion. When Harvey enters the Caribbean as a tropical storm, drops to a tropical depression, then returns to build wind speeds to a Category 4 hurricane prior to landfall. Why did it weaken and then return to be a Category 4 hurricane? The cone of a hurricane is normally an even curve, but Harvey weaves back and forth like a snake, then reverses direction, pulling away from the coastline before returning to slam Houston. Houston was not originally in its path, thus the mayor's wrong call on evacuations. The factors that affect the force of a hurricane are usually consistent, not wavering, which shows the effect of the earth wobble on both water and air masses. The Gulf deals with both the polar push forcing water and air away from Texas, and then the bounce back or the swing to the right and left, relieving or increasing pressure. We warned in 2006 that there would be coastlines that would become virtually uninhabitable due to the earth wobble inducing assaults. After Hurricane Katrina and now Harvey, it is becoming obvious that the Gulf states are among those locations. And what did they say in 2006? I will read that to you. But the word is uninhabitable. And newspapers were using that. News articles stressing, CNN says, the combination of wind and water would leave wide swaths of South Texas uninhabitable for weeks or months. And they liked that word. In 2006, the Zetas predicted this situation where coastlines would become that due to the earth wobble. They refused to name locations at that time, but now they're starting to. It's no longer a prediction, mind you. This is no longer a prediction, but a fact, just another example of the Zeta Talk accuracy. In 2006, they said, we have predicted that coastlines will become uninhabitable in many places, so that crops are grown, but man sleeps restless there. The degree of assault on coastlines that will occur as the earth wobble increases is hardly imagined. This is all just getting started, folks. Okay. Now, how Harvey returned after it backed up, after going all the way to the middle of Texas, backed up over Corpus Christi and moved on down the coast to Houston, and it was not about to leave the Gulf Coast alone. Even after becoming a tropical storm, it kept backing up and returning to the Gulf to slam the coastline once again. And it sort of bebopped down the coast that way. Meanwhile, the oil and gas center of the U.S. and the fourth largest city, Houston shows poor planning. The reservoir system was not designed for a city this size, nor did anyone contemplate rainfall of this scale. Both have combined to create a catastrophe that was, to use the words of the Zetas, hardly imagined. But Houston and the U.S. is not alone. All cities in all countries worldwide are not prepared for what Nibiru will bring. It has only started, and no one is prepared. Early in the Zeta Talk saga, the Zetas warned against what they called melting soil under the influence of flooding. Stagnant water lingering longer than usual can melt soil. If the water is on the move, draining, it can scour this soil. Buildings and bridges and roadways are undermined, destabilized. This is now being reported for the Houston area. The Zetas warned this type of unexpected destabilization, in particular for Paris, Berlin, and Dallas. Let's compare Katrina to Harvey. Katrina was no surprise. I found this, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I was really impressed with how volunteers from everywhere, poured in to help, with the Harvey evacuees, and how there wasn't any fist fights and fighting and rapes and all that, business going on in the shelters. Instead, we had gospel singers. They put the video up on that, and people were, and I saw so many smiling faces for no reason. I'm in a boat with my dog, and here we go, and people, instead of wailing and anger and all that, I said, what is this? There was such a dramatic difference. And I will tell you where I'm going with this, but first I want to compare Katrina and Harvey. Katrina was no surprise, but the evacuation was late and not assisted. FEMA was put in charge by then President Bush. Remember Brownie? He did such a good job. And any U.S. military or National Guard involvement was delayed. There was poor coordination between the then governor and President Bush. And she was a Democrat, and he said she didn't ask, and she said he didn't offer, and he said I did offer. And anyway, the point was, the mayor of New Orleans too, didn't get the buses to the old people. It was just volunteers were discouraged in preference to Blackwater hired mercenaries guarding the wealthy shops. I remember the issue was that Blackwater was walking around with these big, powerful rifles, around the causeways, and what were they there for? We're not calling in the Coast Guard to rescue people off their rooftops, but we got Blackwater there. It was like the wealthy people had to be protected. The city of Gretna, which was a suburb of New Orleans, pointed guns at evacuees trying to escape the flooding to cross a bridge to that suburb, and I remember that it was like, why are they doing? There they stood, on the bridge to Gretna, and because they had a higher percentage of whites than New Orleans did, and they just weren't going to have those people come, even if it was their only way out of the floodwaters. Terrible, and you didn't get any of that in Houston, none of it. And the Superdome shelter had gunfights, rapes, and overflowing toilets. It was just, remember that? Now, compare that to Harvey. Unlike Katrina, which had a known path. Now, Katrina had a known path, but Harvey, backed up and slammed Houston unexpectedly. But when it did, it was a surprise. So at first it landed at Corpus Christi. Hurricane Harvey had an early involvement in the U.S. military and National Guard and good coordination between the Texas governor and President Trump. They were ahead of the curve on all of this. And they also did that with Irma. Trump sent down all Marines in ships, to get ready to land and help out in Florida, and they none of this waiting for anybody. He had them there ahead of time. Katrina flooded the New Orleans because the levees broke, but the flooding in Houston was just as devastating, coming from over 50 inches of rain. Some places had 54, I think, and topping the reservoir. So in a comparison between Katrina and Harvey, including flooding and a sudden switch in the path of a hurricane, Houston had a worse situation to deal with. You can't say it was an easier, So the point I'm getting at, why were the people so cooperative and people opened their homes to each other and this kind of thing. There was a spirit among the volunteers who were encouraged, and even those in the shelters were calm and helpful, almost cheerful. No rapes or looting were reported. Evacuation was encouraged early and assisted, and the routes were not blocked. In fact, people opened their homes. There was one woman who had like 16 people in her home and children, and they were strangers in some case, And the point is, that's what you do, Volunteers came from everywhere, from other states, from nearby towns. Everyone jumped into the pool. They ran boats up and down suburban streets, and when a military truck got stuck in the mud, here came a big wheel truck, to pull them out. And I watched that video, and I think it was on TV too. There was the truck that was military, convoy unit, and this big wheel. They had this car up on top of these wheels. I mean, each of those wheels was larger than the car, and it was like a peanut on top of a monster, and then they attached a rope, and here comes the big wheel and pulls the truck out of the mud, and there was no end of cooperation in it. Nobody was fighting. There wasn't any strutting, like, this is my terrain, get out of here, I'm in charge. None of that was going on. Just helpful, cooperation. Katrina had these types of volunteers too, but they were people that finally got fed up waiting for the federal government to rescue people off the rooftops. They would say, all right, I'm from nearby whatever, and I've come with my boat, and I'm taking grandma, off the roof, and that type of thing. Or they would come out with a wash bucket or something, and the kids were in the wash bucket and people were pulling it along. They helped themselves, and very few, but not because there was any encouragement for volunteerism or any although apparently with Harvey they said we want volunteers, and they did that. Florida did that too. We're still waiting to see what the outcome of all that is, because he was begging that governor. He said, we need more, we need more. But the spirit of Houston was just amazing. Then I want to say what happened between 2005 when Katrina slammed New Orleans and 2017 when Harvey slammed Houston. What happened? We're talking 10 years. So what happened that there was such a change? It's palpable. I couldn't help but know. In 2008, here's my theory. In 2008, according to the Zetas, in the opinion of the Zetas, there were 12,000 contactees. Actually, they said in 1998, all the way up into 2008, around that number, right? But by 2016, they said this number had grown to over 4.2 billion, more than half the world's population. An explosion. Why? Because they were distressed about the weather, and they see the sun coming up in the wrong place, or this or that, and they say, what's going on? And when you have that kind of curiosity and you're asking, it's called the call by the Zetas. And beep-boo, here are the aliens saying, you called, and they get their questions answered. So they became contactees, a huge number. These contactees know what is coming. They know the pending passage of Nibiru will be catastrophic. They know what's going to happen to their locale, to their lives. They know they have to move to safer locations. They can't live on the coastlines, right? Many are braced for the need to move to higher ground to leave the coastline, but are unable to muster the finances or convince their family to move. How many people living in the Houston area had subconscious knowledge about what was coming during the pole shift? My guess is at least half. How many were looking for an excuse to leave the coastline, but didn't have the finances or were locked into debt slavery? I owe on my credit card, I owe my mortgage, I owe on my car. The kids are in school, my wife likes her church, blah, blah, blah. And it's always so hard, and until you have to actually must move. Well, wait, now the house washed away. You no longer have a job because your employer will be down for like years. They got ruined, by the flooding or the wind or whatever. Guess what? You can go up to Kansas and live with Uncle Bob. We're out of here. And that's why they have the smiles. How many dealt with a reluctant family, didn't want to move due to school and jobs and frankly just being lazy? Sometimes that's it. Can't I stay another day? It's like clean your room. No, not today. So you don't know. It's always easy to make excuses, right? So now many of these people will have been freed. And I promised you about Irma also. Well, I just was working on that today. Where the beaches at Tampa and the Bahamas had water receding, as Irma was approaching, right? Now, yes, hurricanes go in a counterclockwise swirl, so the winds coming, will swoop around from the east and come in toward the west and tend to push the water, especially if it's coming up along the coastlines. In the case of the Bahamas, it didn't come up along the coastlines. It just passed, across them. Bahamas are really long island series, but in Tampa it was coming up along the coastlines, so the winds in the swirl would come east to west and push. Well, I can't even find any evidence that has happened in prior hurricanes. You hear about storm surge, the big wash of water coming in, but you don't hear, then you get the receding, and then, here comes the surge. So it was so extreme, the manatees were stranded out there, and they had to be, people taking pictures like crazy. And then in the Bahamas, the same thing happened, and it was and a north-south kind of beach. It was a north beach rather than a west beach, but we get the wobble going north and south and then east and west. It has that figure eight. Anyway, you have to see the picture to understand. So what causes this? The wobble. When you've got something that is leaning to the right, all the land is pulling to the east, and it creates a void on the west. Or if you have something that's dropping to the south, it creates a void on the north side. So that was compounded. So it was the hurricane wind and the wobble creating these beach receding situations. But not every beach. We didn't hear about that in the Keys. We didn't hear about that on the coast of Cuba. We didn't hear about that in the Caribbean islands, or even around Miami. I'm trying to think if we had a receding beach. A little bit, I think we did. So my point is, it's not every place, just some places, depending on what the Wobble does when.
Right.
So we've had
I was going to say maybe that
hurricanes.
Maybe it's a function of time, at, like you said, when the wobble happens. Like maybe it's a function of time as to when the water recedes. Why we didn't see it in Miami or Keys, but we did see it in Tampa.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Exactly.
That it's what the timing
yes.
of and the tides and because people were walking around on the dry or not semi-dry seabed, the ocean floor, and taking photos and videos and all kinds. They're out there for a while. I'm thinking, well, in a tsunami situation, the water gets drawn up by the wave. It gets pulled back from the coastline that's about to be hit by the wave because all of the mass of the water is being sucked up by the wave energy. But in this case, if the storm, it should be pushing water. That's what a storm surge is. So the storm retreat, I'm using air quotes, and that won't be in the video, but the storm retreat that is a brand new thing that I've never heard about would be behind the storm. So even their explanation of what's going on didn't even make sense.
Yeah, exactly. So I tried to find the time on that, like with the Tampa one. It seemed to me that it was early morning. People got up and said, oh, look, because there was a few people wandering around out there, but even more were scrambling down the steps like they had just gotten up. And there was no evidence of wind. You couldn't see anything blowing around at all, nothing. So it wasn't the hurricane winds that blew that stuff out. So, but with the Bahamas, there was no mention as to the timing of that, what time of day. So it's a little hard, but I know for Tampa, if something happened at night, where in the morning they found the water out there, in the middle of the night you have on the other side of the globe you have the Pacific. Well, there's what the Zetas call the polar push, and it shoves the North Pole up. So that in fact the land would be moving down, and it would create a void somewhere in there. So, but you'd have to be a lot more precise. You'd have to find out. I couldn't find the exact time of day. I was guessing, So I just said, well, you can't find it. I Googled and I Googled and I said, receding beaches during hurricanes. And I got onto 5 pages of Google things listing, and it was all Irma. Nothing about any other hurricane ever. Then I went into Wikipedia and was talking about the storm surge, but it didn't say beaches will recede and then there will be a storm surge. Not once. We know about tsunamis, but not hurricanes. So anyway, we're getting more and more evidence, but everybody wants to know the dates. And I copied off some of my email examples to show people as to the kind of stuff, I get an email where people really say, okay, when's this going to happen? And they talk about the pole shift. Now, a million times, the date is not to be known. Even Jesus said, no one shall know the date of my return, as you put it, But and the reason for that is it would be misused by people that would put you in slave camps or whatever, So they give a series of steps that are going to happen. They talked about how the plates are going to move, and they are moving like that. And they talked about the wobble and how it's going to get worse and in what manner and, that type of thing. And then they were very, very specific about the last week, 7.3 weeks, which will either happen going into the end of August, going into the end of December, or going into the end of April. 7.3 weeks, which is really kind of a 2-month period. So general parameters, but by the time the last weeks are playing out, you will not be confused because it includes things like 3 days of darkness and the Earth turning almost upside down for 6 days and seeming to have a sunrise from the west, and you will know. And at that time, if you have been delaying and being lazy and saying, can't I just, you gotta move to safe locations. Don't be caught, So. Anyway, there was a guy who wrote to me, and I'm going to give you some examples. He lives in Perth, Australia, which the Zetas have said because of India being pushed down and under the Himalayas, the western two-thirds of Australia is supposed to be submerged, And he says he has 10 acres in Tasmania, lucky guy. I feel we have to leave the west coast for Tasmania or the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, and even old Queensland. Can you please give me a time frame when planet X will pass and cause these events? How long do we have? Lots of people can see the planet behind us. What date or month or year do you think it will, what, can you give me the date? When will we get uncomfortable in our perch here in Perth? How long do we really have? And people have even said, you can tell me. I know it's supposed to be a secret, but you can.
Right.
So I say, of course, the whole thing that I told you, the date is not to be known.
Right.
And then they want to know about martial law and that type of thing. Somebody said to me, you guys have stated that the Madrid fault and San Andreas fault will happen before the start of the last weeks. I'm worried about people in Southern California after the San Andreas fault, happens. Will they be able to leave California during those last weeks, or will there be broken roads or other problems? I mean, well, I keep saying, don't wait, move now. Growing chickens and goats and gardens and all, there's a learning curve here, and best to be in your safe locations and snug. What are you waiting for? One more trip to Disneyland? So, and I say travel is likely to be restricted. Broken bridges, torn roads, clogged roadways, lack of gasoline. That happens in Florida. And then there are the martial law restrictions that might apply. I advise, if they clamp you down, then they're going to say you can't travel. I always advise that people should be in their safe locations now, right? One more day, what's the excuse? So they can get hostile, too, people. Here's a hostile. Did the Zetas tell you not to give us a date? Just that 7 weeks thing. Or is that you, Nancy? I think it's unfair not to tell us. The cabal and the elite lie to us, and they know the date, right? No, they don't. They don't know the date. Why should your loyal followers not know and prepare? I know you say 3 different months to look for, but what year? So he thought if he got sarcastic, it would be good, I said, well, that's all you're going to get, and the elite don't know, right? Here's another one. This guy thought he can calculate, because the Zetas put out the whole, and pole shifting guy, Kojima, a guy in Japan, very talented with graphics, put it all together, everything the Zetas have ever said about where Nibiru is and where the Earth is and where Venus is and where the dark twin is and how it's going to move around, because they've said there's this triangle thing that they gave out 20 years ago, and the angles of this and that, and the, as Nibiru approaches, and at some point Venus escapes, because it's pushed toward Earth and it's trapped and then bops out, and the dark twin sneaks around behind the Earth and moves along, and then the Earth is drawn toward Nibiru, in the last weeks, and then all of a sudden the passage happens, and where this is, the distance from the sun, and where the Earth can be expected at any given point, and very exacting, and always. It's remarkable to me that Zeta Talk always correlates completely. You can have 20 to 25 years I've been at this, and you can take all these little pieces of tidbits given and lay them out on the table, and they all say the same thing. They do not contradict each other. And I think that's astonishing. I think that's an example that it's not me, it's them, and anyway. So there was a guy who said, oh wait, I'm looking at the photo I took, and I think it's approximately at the point where Venus's orbit is, and we can calculate that. And if it's there, then, in other words, he's pronouncing himself as being able to figure out when the date might be by how much progress it made. But this is a 2D. You look at these photos, it's 2D. And Nibiru is always completely fuzzed up with his dust cloud, etc. So you can't do that. So anyway, here's another hostile. This one is from a guy who's angry at the Council of Worlds. The Zetas recently said the cover-up over Nibiru is in its death throes. But what about the false September 23rd date orchestrated by the establishment cover-up? Can it possibly interfere with the announcement, and so that would be delayed another year? Or does the announcement team simply ignore it? Because if Nibiru is not admitted by the end of the year, it will be another huge disappointment. We've been patient. Oh, dear.
Wow.
He has spoken. And I said, read about the David Mean book, the 923 Expectations, already addressed in Zeta Talk, and your impatience is not the most important thing here. We are all rushing to be sure that you're not disappointed. Poor child, But really, that's what he's saying. Don't disappoint me. Well, I'm sorry. Did you get what you wanted for Christmas last year? His disappointment is anyway. I'm ranting.
Well,
All right.
isn't the announcement in the announcement would be from the humans, right? So announcement, thereby is in the hands of man, and Obama tried to do it several times and didn't have very good luck, and finally just gave up. So okay. Nancy,
so
get on that announcement thing. Come on.
Apparently I'm in charge, or he is in charge, and I'm not doing right. But people like this, they try. They try sugar, and if that doesn't work, they try vinegar, and different things. Okay, here's a guy who's got yet another approach. Are the Zetas using a nonlinear numeric scale as a guide to the pole shift date? We're always after that date. A nonlinear scale would provide more range of flexibility, and thus void any attempt at simple extrapolations to determine an accurate pole shift date or date range. Perhaps a moot point, since there are many advance warnings yet to come, as well as biblical clues to use. It would seem advisable, though, to skew the current status toward a higher degree of urgency to promote preparations. Am I correct about a nonlinear scale? I don't even know what he's talking about. So are we getting into math? In other words, if they say 7.3 weeks, they don't mean 7.3 weeks or something? I'm not sure, but they keep trying different angles, right? So and here's somebody who knows the date. I thought this was clever. I've been reveling in the information you provide. You seek a timeline. The date is exactly 34 years, 34 weeks, 34 hours, 34 minutes, and 34 seconds from the day I was born on January 21st, 1983. I've been researching this for many months, and I've been living this all my life. 21 more wake-ups. This was a little bit past. I'm excited. So anybody who wants to know when the pole shift is going to happen, there it is. Here's somebody who knows, right?
I'm just trying to do the math there. I think we missed his date already. I think we blew through it.
Yeah, I think so.
21 wake-ups, sort of. Yeah. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. Anyway, that's an example of my email queue every day.
What is the significance? I know this. I know the answer to this, but some of our listeners might want to know why would the last weeks start in December, April, August? Magnetic trimester, is that just the time when that part of the magnetic flow releases and then it just starts? Is that December, April, August is the start of the last week scheduled, right? It's going to start.
No. It's actually A magnetic trimester changes. There's a
Okay.
change, and this was apparently for the last 2 or 3 years. The whole thing with magnetic trimesters is irrelevant because Nibiru is so close, and we're having all this EMP and stuff, so that it's
Right.
irrelevant. But way back in 2003 and 4, they used to call it the Christmas hammer, and then toward the end of August, the 21st or something like that, there something else would happen, and you would notice a change in uh, reading the magnetosphere, that was coming toward, from the sun. And the Zeta said it's not the sun; it's like a big, broad thing that our sun and whole solar system is caught in, and it has those cycles, right? And the end of April.
Mhm.
So they're saying, in order for the pole shift to happen at a magnetic trimester, which is maybe the 20th of December, 20th of August, and I don't think it's the exact 30th, the exact end, but more or less
Mhm.
three times, that you'd have to count back 7.3 weeks. So if we count
Right.
back from
Okay.
December
Yep.
20th, 7.3, we're in October, aren't we? Yeah, later October. 'cause
September.
it's 2 months. Yeah. Let's
Yep.
see,
Oh, yeah, for the
December
start.
to November to October. Um, yeah, somewhere in October. So that's how you would calculate it. So the last weeks would set in, 7.3 weeks ahead of the trimester dates. But they won't say which trimester, and they won't say which year at all.
Right.
And I think we've got a lot of wobbling to go, and I think we covered this in a prior Zeta report, that a Muslim cleric came to put heads together with me to solve a riddle, which was in their hadiths that said, before the new age starts, we're going to have a year that will seem like a day, a month that will seem like a day, and a week that will seem like a day. And the Zeta said what that was. So the week that will seem like a day is the week of rotation stoppage, 5.9 days, because that's
Mhm.
a week, but nothing happens. And the month that will seem like a day is, within the last weeks, that there's so much twisting and turning and 3 days of darkness, and then we're upside down, and then we, slowly stop rotation and this and that, and, so it's within the 7.3 weeks. So that's the month. But what about that year that will seem like a day? Well, there's a lot of wobbling that's going to happen before we get into the last weeks, where we might have the sun rising over the North Pole with a move into opposition, which is which has happened. Not that it rises over the North Pole, but where our North Pole is trying to point at the sun, temporarily, and all of a sudden the sun is rising and setting quite high, northeast, northwest. Or the other way around, where we're pointing away, or you can have like flopping to the side, where the North Pole, points off to the right and then to the left, so that the sun would be in the wrong place, but essentially, in the equator, where people are at the equator, would see the sun overhead as the day rolls, so it may not be that obvious, but you can imagine what's going on with the oceans and the atmosphere during this. It's just nutsy. Hurricanes forever or whatever to certain parts of the globe. And people that are contactees for sure have told me of visions, and they match. Some of these people match with other people that have told me these things, where the sun will set and then it will rise again, and then it will set again. That type of thing, And we already have something going on up there in Alaska, where because of the wobble, you can see it's midnight up there, and all of a sudden you can see the sun rising in the east over Europe, and then it gets dark again, and then we've turned around to where we're having the real dawn for Alaska, and there's the sun again. So it's not supposed to happen. These kind of things, it can be that erratic to where people don't know if it's day or night, and they think, is my clock wrong? I hate to think of it, so we may have that's the year that seems like a day. I don't think we're there yet. So I think we have some time to go, but not a lot, so much of these warnings are nebulous, but I think we're going to get an awful lot of wobbling, and people subconsciously know what's coming. And our
Right.
advice is, don't wait. To heck with the fancy car, to heck with the mortgage payment. Go to Uncle Bob's and learn how to milk goats.
Exactly. Get prepared. Get to your safe
Yep.
location.
Yep.
Thanks, Nancy. A lot of information in this episode. We did the post-eclipse evidence, as well as huge evidence of Wobble showing up in hurricane paths and what's actually happening out there. So I agree with you, though, that a lot of people are starting to subconsciously or consciously understand what's actually happening in our universe and in our world specifically. And I think going forward, we should be in good shape. Just get to your safe locations and don't dawdle. Don't stay tippy, on the beach.
Don't be a manatee. Yeah. Don't be
No.
a manatee.
Okay.
Don't be
When
stranded
the
out
water
there
is
with no water.
right,
Yeah.
nobody's going to rescue you. According to
Yeah.
FEMA, you're on your own. On your own.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
But we got help at zetatalk.com and usaebn.org, as well as poleshift.ning.com. And the YouTube for this episode, once you see the YouTube out there, folks, you'll understand some of these pictures that we're talking about with the path of the eclipse, as well as the path of the wobble on the hurricane. So the YouTube will be up on Nancy Leader channel on YouTube.
Yes. Thanks, Andre. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have for this episode of